When it comes to Halloween for us Muppet fans, some of our favorite things to watch are the Vincent Price and Alice Cooper episodes of The Muppet Show. Both episodes were centered entirely around ghosts and spooky things, whether that be in skits or in backstage plots. However, there are a few episodes where the backstage plots had a Halloween theme to them as well. Before I begin this review, I'd like to give a special thank you to Muppet Wiki for bringing this to my attention in a social media post. When I saw it, I thought it would be fun to look back on all 6 episodes, including the main ones for us Muppet fans, so let's begin with number 1, Vincent Price. In celebration of special guest Vincent Price and his long resume of horror films, the entire show is set up around monsters, ghouls, and other scary stuff, beginning with the opening number, a large orange monster singing "I've Got You Under My Skin" after eating a small reddish-purple creature who apparently survived as he sings along with him. "I've Got You Under My Skin" had been done by the Muppets before, with a recording by Stan Freberg being used on Jim Henson's earliest series, Sam and Friends. But on The Muppet Show, the performers would sing in their own voices, the monster known as Behemoth by Richard Hunt, and the other creature known as Shaky Sanchez by Jim Henson. We see Shaky Sanchez a few more times backstage throughout this episode, and we can clearly understand his name. He appears to be very shaky after being eaten by Behemoth. Backstage, Scooter informs Kermit that an act has come to audition, but when Kermit asks, "Who is he?" Scooter answers that it isn't a he nor a she, but a they. Kermit asks if there's more than one, but when Scooter answers no, Kermit is very confused. That is until Scooter introduces the act to Kermit, a 3-headed monster. The next act is introduced by Hilda, the show's seamstress. Hilda was a main player on The Muppet Show for only its first season. After the departure of her performer Aaron Oscar, Hilda only appeared sporadically in the background of the show and in movies and specials. In her introduction, Hilda reveals that she is from Transylvania, where the sketch is set, The House of Horror. In this sketch, Gonzo and Fozzie have rented a summer cottage, but Fozzie finds it a bit scary. While Gonzo isn't scared, he does point out that it's much different than the ad that he saw in the Vampire Weekly paper. As they get surrounded by ghosts, they are visited by Vincent Price after the road had washed out and his horse had a flat tire. Must have been driving a Mustang. Now, this episode was produced for the first season of The Muppet Show, and the format was a bit different. As many of us know, most episodes of The Muppet Show started with Scooter coming into the guest star's dressing room telling them, 15 seconds to curtain, followed by Scooter making humorous small talk with the guest. But that wouldn't be done until the second season, so when Vincent Price comes into the scene and everyone applauds, it really does feel like a classic variety show. Anyway, carrying on, Vincent isn't traveling alone. He has brought with him his beautiful assistant and a hideously deformed monster, as we meet Uncle Deadly in his first appearance, who claims to be the beautiful assistant. Vincent asks Fozzie and Gonzo for the time, but Fozzie's hourglass no longer works. How? How does your hourglass no longer work? Causing Vincent and Deadly to get concerned as once the clock strikes midnight, Vincent turns into, as Uncle Deadly says, a screaming, maniacal, demonic, raging, bloodlusting animal, with Vincent adding, and then I get mean. As Vincent starts to make the transformation, Uncle Deadly notices something different about it, asking Fozzie and Gonzo what day it is. Given that it's New Year's Eve, Vincent turns into Guy Lombardo. In the UK, the line was changed from Guy Lombardo to Jack Parnell, who was the conductor for the Muppet Show band and a well-known conductor in the UK. Backstage, the 3-headed monster waits to audition, but when Kermit asks about their act, they have different answers. No matter what the question is, each one of the heads gives Kermit a different answer just as the next act hits the stage, the Muppet Show's singing duo of Wayne and Wanda with their rendition of Bewitched, Bothered, and Bewildered. Wayne and Wanda were often used in this season alone of The Muppet Show. Sam the Eagle would often introduce them with high praise, often stating that they are the only normal characters on The Muppet Show, but the duo never complete their performance as something always causes it to go awry. For this one, just as Wanda makes it to the song title, her head is turned into a monster's head. Another recurring sketch during The Muppet Show's first season was a panel discussion hosted by Kermit. He would introduce these sketches by saying, "Time once again to raise the intellectual level of our program," usually with the guest star and several other Muppets. Kermit is joined in this sketch by Vincent Price alongside of Muppet chef Pierre Lecousse, who according to Vincent is one of the world's finest chefs, and with them is a Muppet monster named Gorgon Heap, one of the world's finest eaters. In addition to his popularity as an actor in horror movies, Vincent Price also was a gourmet chef and author of a few cookbooks. In this sketch, the topic of discussion is gourmet dining. But every time a new dish is brought up into the conversation, Gorgon begins eating everything around him before eating Pierre and Kermit, with Vincent starting to crave frog's legs. This season also included a series of skits called At the Dance, in which Muppet pairs would tell jokes in a ballroom. This also was done mostly in the first season, and a lot of the pairs were featured quite regularly, most notably Zoot and Janice, and the minor characters Mildred Huckstetter and George the Janitor, who are the only ones who are not monsters and vampires. Why don't we stop and have a drink? We can't. Why not? They don't serve spirits here. In the UK, The Muppet Show ran 2 minutes longer than it did on American television due to American TV having more commercials. This extra time was filled by including an additional skit that was not aired in the US, known as the UK spot. Keeping in vein with the episode's theme, a group of ghosts performed the Beatles' I'm Looking Through You, frightening Fozzie in the process. Usually at the halfway point of these episodes, Kermit would chat with the guest star about themselves. This skit was known as the talk spot, or sometimes the wall, due to Kermit sitting on a wall with the guest star sitting in front. Kermit asks Vincent Price how he is able to turn into a vampire in his movies. As Vincent suddenly grows vampire teeth, he answers that it takes a lot of concentration and emotional training to just randomly turn into a vampire, just as Kermit also suddenly grows vampire teeth and bites Vincent. Backstage, the three-headed monster asks when they're going to perform, but Kermit tells them that he doesn't have a spot for them. The monster is disappointed as they already have planned a big song, Tea for Three. That's the last straw for Kermit, and he demands that the monster leave. In a Muppet News flash, the Muppet Newsman reports that furniture has been coming alive and turning into monsters, while a Muppet Whatnot is watching this report on TV as he becomes the next victim of this report, with his own TV eating him alive. The newsman finds this very hard to believe until he gets eaten by his own table. In this sketch, the newsman reports that the monster furniture stories were claimed to be false by Sheriff David Goals, a reference to Muppet performer Dave Goals, known to us as Gonzo, Dr. Bunsen Honeydew, Zoot, and Beauregard. Vincent Price returns to the stage for the closing number, You've Got a Friend, performed by him alongside several Muppet monsters. This episode of The Muppet Show was also the first to be centered around a certain theme, which would become a regular thing as the show continued. This would be shown in both backstage plots and in sketches and songs. Number 2. Twiggy. Another from the first season of the show. Unlike the previous one, this one is not centered around them, and the backstage plot doesn't involve the guest star, but there are still some moments that I'm going to mention. After the first act, Scooter appears nervously to Kermit, claiming there to be a phantom of the Muppet Show. Kermit brushes it off as Scooter explains to him that he saw a ghoulish creature in the guest star's dressing room. Hilda claims it to be her hanging up the wardrobe, but Scooter insists that this is something that Kermit should look into. Hilda jokes, "Yes, your head." Just then, Wanda comes out of the dressing room screaming that she saw a phantom. One of my favorite moments from this episode is when Gonzo is introducing Twiggy's first act, but introduces her as Branchy and Leafy before Fozzie corrects him. Backstage, Fozzie and Gonzo claim to have seen the Phantom, with Gonzo claiming to have seen him behind the sewing machine. Once again, Hilda claims it to be her, calling Gonzo a scaredy cat. Kermit still doesn't believe the claims about the Phantom until he reveals himself after Kermit leaves. There's a really nice sketch in this episode involving Twiggy where she tells Gonzo and Muppy, Scooter's uncle's dog, the A.A. Milne story The King's Breakfast, claiming to have even rehearsed it prior. The King and Queen puppets in this skit actually go back a bit. The King was previously used as King Goshposh in Jim Henson's unaired pilot Tales of the Tinker-Dee. However, the puppet would be used for other projects before being refined as King Rupert II for the 1971 special The Frog Prince. The Queen puppet was previously used as King Goshposh's advisor Featherstone in the 1970 special Hey Cinderella, and again for The Frog Prince. This episode was also one of the few appearances of a Muppet machine named Vendaface. In this sketch, Fozzie passes by the machine, and after Vendaface continues to ask him to insert more coins, Vendaface tells Fozzie that his problem is that he is much too generous. Realizing that he was cheated out of his money, Fozzie gets angry, to which Vendaface adds that Fozzie has a bad temper, as the machine's hands come out to strangle him. After Hilda continued to insist that the rest of the Muppets were seeing her instead of the Phantom, Hilda claims to have seen him, at first thinking that it was Gonzo. Gonzo adds that it was him, trying to hide from the Phantom. Kermit still is not convinced until Fozzie points out that he's behind him. The rest of the Muppets run off in fear, but Kermit doesn't fall for it until he turns to the Phantom's direction, seemingly not afraid of him until the Phantom laughs maniacally. Just knowing that this is Uncle Deadly, and as soon as I said laughs maniacally, I heard maniacal laugh, maniacal laugh. You Muppet fans know what I'm talking about. The Phantom then introduces himself to Kermit as Uncle Deadly, or the Phantom of the Muppet Show. This episode was the official introduction of the character, although he appeared in the earlier Vincent Price episode, but pretty much as a generic character. In this episode, Uncle Deadly explains that he was a Shakespearean actor who performed in the Muppet Theater regularly, but on the opening night of his portrayal of Othello, he was killed. By the critics. Kermit at first laughs this off as a joke until Uncle Deadly threatens him to leave or be doomed! After Deadly's dramatic exit, which makes me think of the Count on Sesame Street, the other Muppets inform Kermit that George the janitor had found a phantom mask and cape in the cellar and was trying to prank everyone. However, Uncle Deadly returns threatening once again, leave or be doomed! This frightens the Muppets away as Uncle Deadly compliments himself for what he claims to be one of the greatest performances of his career. During the curtain call, Twiggy thanks Kermit for having her on the show, even liking Uncle Deadly. Kermit tells her that she can have him, but then she admits that she didn't like him that much. After this, Uncle Deadly would continue to be used on the show on very sporadic occasions. Among some of his most memorable appearances on the show have included a rendition of the classic jazz song The Sheik of Araby, and as the villain in the Muppet melodrama sketches. Only 2 of these were done and would feature Miss Piggy as a damsel in distress, but when Wayne, portraying the role as the masculine hero type, attempts to rescue her, he would instantly bond with Uncle Deadly. After that, Uncle Deadly mostly appeared in the background in movies and specials before being retired altogether by the 90s as his performer Jerry Nelson began phasing out of performing as Muppet characters. But for the 2011 film The Muppets, Uncle Deadly returned as an aide to the film's main villain Tex Richman, performed now by Matt Vogel. But he became a real fan favorite when the 2015 ABC series launched, and Uncle Deadly worked in the wardrobe department for Miss Piggy's late-night talk show. Since then, Uncle Deadly has become a main player with the Muppets franchise, even hosting the Muppet Thought of the Week series of YouTube videos.
It's because Matt has taken a character that like you said, Jerry didn't quite know what to do with him, and he wasn't that established, and just completely grown this magnificent character who is so good and wonderful. That's an exception to the rule of some, because Matt's basically, I mean, Jerry originated the character, but man, Matt has just, anyway.
He made him funnier.
Well, he made him funnier, but also he just really fleshed him out as far as who he is and where he's coming from and what he wants in the world and how he reacts to the people around him. And it's just pure magic.
Number 3, Alice Cooper. This episode was from the show's 3rd season, and by this time, a lot had changed. The head writer for season 1 was comedian Jack Burns and mostly focused on running gags. Burns left after season 1 and was replaced by longtime Muppet writer Jerry Jewell, who would continue to serve as the Muppet Show's head writer for the rest of its run. At the Dance appeared very sporadically, Wayne and Wanda were dropped, and the panel discussions were abandoned to allow for backstage plots. Aaron Osger, the performer of Hilda, Wanda, and Janice at the time, and John Lovelady, a regular Muppet performer and builder, had left the show, with their characters either retired or taken over by other puppeteers. As funny as Jack Burns was, the Muppet Show felt a bit clustery under his supervision when compared to later. When Jerry Jewell took over, the Muppet Show became more focused on what goes on behind the scenes of the show from the Muppets' perspective, with the sketches usually being relevant to the plot. Season 2 was when Scooter would knock on the guest star's dressing room door and tell them, 15 seconds to curtain! In this one, when Scooter notices a group of monsters with Alice Cooper in his dressing room, Scooter informs Alice that they aren't theirs, to which Alice responds that they're his. And he isn't wrong, none of them are the classic Muppet monsters that we normally see. Like the Vincent Price episode, the sketches and songs in this episode have a very eerie tone to them, beginning with Alice's opening number, Welcome to My Nightmare, as he emerges from a coffin. Kermit compliments Alice on the number, adding, It must be great to be a rock star. Upon hearing that, Alice asks Kermit if he would like to be a rock star, offering him a contract. But when Kermit reads it and Alice explains it, Kermit changes his mind and says he's more interested in being an astronaut, so Alice tells Kermit that he can change the contract by writing astronaut in place of rock star for only the price of his soul. In a Muppet Labs sketch, Dr. Bunsen Honeydew presents his and Beaker's latest invention, the germ enlarger. But when they use it, the germ grows and attacks Beaker, with Bunsen even chuckling after Kermit asks if the germ is contagious. Meanwhile, Gonzo reads Alice's contract, and when Kermit explains it to him, Gonzo finds selling his soul to the devil to become rich and famous exciting, but can't find a pen to sign the contract. The most bizarre sketch in this episode featured a group of Muppet stalagmites, one of whom complains about having a bad toothache, with his fellow Speleothems repeating what he says. at least for the most part. At one point, after the lead stalagmite comments that he keeps hearing voices, the rest of them just move their mouths, or say something completely unrelated, or finish the sentence for him. But as it turns out, they're just a set of teeth belonging to another Muppet stalagmite who repeats the sketch, also with the help of his fellow speleothems. While Alice Cooper is in his dressing room, he gets visited by Sam the Eagle, who chastises him for his weird performance style, but Alice takes this as a compliment. Sam comments, "Freakos 1, Civilization 0. The eeriness is too much for Fozzie to handle, so he decides to hang out in the theater canteen with a group of clean-cut kids, who turn out to be the opposite. Fozzie says to himself, "Why can't we have one thing nice on this show tonight?" Fozzie gets his wish in the next sketch, a performance of the classic song Somewhere Over the Rainbow by Robin the Frog, one of the most memorable Muppet Show moments. This episode's UK spot continues the trend of creepy stuff. The skit starts with Kermit at his desk as a candle moves seemingly on its own. Kermit blows it out and makes a reference to him being a puppet, looking at the viewer and saying, "Think about that." Then several Muppet monsters creep up behind Kermit wearing skull masks. After they frighten Kermit away, the monsters sing about their once-a-year day and mysteriously vanish at the end of the number. While Alice Cooper is known for his very dark style, his next song sort of grants Fozzie's wish. While in his dressing room, he performs his ballad You and Me with a bird-like Muppet, although the dressing room is still decorated with spooky stuff. Just as the song ends, it's revealed that this creature is actually Miss Piggy, having been turned into this creature, I don't know what to call it, but anyway, having been turned into this creature by Alice's magic, but she doesn't realize it until Scooter calls her for Pigs in Space. Miss Piggy demands that Alice change her back, and when she returns to her normal self, she tells Alice that she wouldn't sell her soul even if she were paid to. After Piggy takes off, Alex contacts his boss asking for commissions on hourly rentals, much to his boss's chagrin. In this episode's Pigs in Space sketch, Captain Link Hogthrob has been suffering from a mysterious space disease. Dr. Strangepork is a bit nervous to try the shock treatment to help, as it could be fatal, and suggests that Piggy give Link mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. Not wanting any part of that, Piggy decides to go with the shock treatment. While it seems to cure Link, it turns him into an outline of himself. Piggy tries to turn off the shock treatment, but nothing works. Link is very concerned, but Piggy tells Link that he looks more interesting this way. Strangepork doesn't agree, but Piggy says that she was only trying to make Link feel better. And it seems to work as Link kisses Piggy, turning her into an outline as well. Strangepork laughs at Link and Piggy's new look, resulting in Piggy karate chopping Strangepork and turning him into an outline as well, the rest of the ship almost instantly. After Alice's closing number, a very wild version of School's Out where he goes from being in costume as a graduate to the devil, Kermit brings him and his monster gang on stage for a curtain call as he just magically shows up. Just then, the lights suddenly dim as Gonzo also shows up magically with the bill from special effects. This episode was the first time that Steve Whitmire ever performed for the Muppets. He had no speaking parts in the episode, but as the show continued, he would perform various one-off characters before getting regulars such as Rizzo the Rat, Lips the trumpet player, Miss Piggy's dog Foo-Foo, and Bean Bunny. He would later take over Beaker from Richard Hunt and Kermit from Jim Henson. Kermit also makes a reference to a previous Muppet Show episode following Alice's opening number, saying to himself, "Things weren't this spooky when Julie Andrews did the show." Although Julie Andrews did do a number where she was being chased by a gaggle of Muppet monsters who only wanted her autograph. And that bird-like monster character that Alice sang to returned in a later episode of the show. The format of that episode was done as a mock-up awards ceremony, where the puppet was revealed to be named Beaky and was nominated for Best Unexplainable Creature. Number 4. Liza Manelli. Like I said before, beginning with the second season, the show had more of a sitcom style to it, with the variety show sketches and songs sometimes having to do with the episode's plot. This episode of The Muppet Show was done as a mock-up murder mystery, and begins as soon as Scooter calls on Liza Manelli just as he suddenly passes out with a knife in his back, and Liza praises him on his brilliant acting, with Scooter turning out to be just fine. In Kermit's introduction to the show, he tells the audience that they're going to be doing a very different show. Matter of fact, it's so different I have to go backstage and get ready for it, asking Scooter to handle hosting duties in Kermit's place, as Scooter comes on stage still with the knife in his back, pretending to be dead. But Scooter is alive enough to officially introduce an evening of intrigue and mystery. Parodying classic mystery stories, Kermit narrates from his point of view as a private eye, with his reporter outfit from Sesame Street being used as his detective outfit as he is visited by Liza O'Shaughnessy, played by Liza Manelli, an actress who is set to open a show at the Roxy Club. However, before a rehearsal, she found a note in her dressing room that read, "Close down the show. If you try to open, you will all die," pinned to her dresser Gladys with a knife. The Muppet Theater itself is used as the Roxy as Kermit hangs around backstage trying not to be conspicuous, which immediately fails when Kermit knocks down a table of props, angering the show's director Fritz, really just the Dr. Julius Strangepork puppet. This actually makes me wonder if Strangepork on Pigs in Space is just a character, by which I mean Link Hogthrob is shown to be an actor in many aspects on The Muppet Show, such as on Pigs in Space and Bear on Patrol, while also performing many singing numbers. So, is Strangepork his actual name? After Kermit takes off, Fritz carries on with their rehearsal for Liza's number, but Beauregard informs him that Liza isn't ready yet. Fritz calls for the understudy, Miss Piggy, but she refuses to participate unless she can star in it just as Liza arrives for the opening number, a rendition of Copacabana, alongside of two full-bodied Muppet monster dancers, one of who is murdered in the middle of it. At the end of the number, Zoot compliments Liza for her performance, saying that she is too good to be a person and should have been a saxophone. But just as Fritz calls for another take, he suddenly gets shot. Gonzo pays tribute to Fritz by performing the start of the song Great Day, as the number segues into all of the Muppets dressed as angels, with Gonzo in the role of Gabriel playing the trumpet as Fritz is raised up to heaven. Backstage, Patrol Bear Fozzie has been assigned to the murder case, and his first question to the Muppets is, "Which one of you killed the director?" And all of the Muppets deny any involvement just as Scooter shows up, still in costume as an angel, with some of his own suspects with reason to believe why they would be behind it. Miss Piggy for Fritz making her the understudy and not the star, and the Electric Mayhem Band because they haven't been paid for 3 weeks. Scooter then admits that he does know who the real murderer is, but doesn't get the chance to reveal it as he is the next victim. Liza informs Kermit that the murderer is in the dressing room next to hers, but when he goes in to look for himself, the room is completely pitch black and he finds himself a bit frightened by the mysterious underscore. Suddenly, a flashlight shines on Kermit as he is hit. In the UK spot for this episode, Janice is nervous to rehearse with the band because of all the murders, but Floyd insists that the show must go on as animals chants in agreement. The band rehearses the song Pass That Peace Pipe with a group of Muppet dogs, including Muppy and Baskerville. Baskerville was first used alongside of Rolf in a commercial for Purina Dog Chow in the 1960s, before becoming a regular on The Muppet Show, performed most frequently by Jerry Nelson. Muppy was first introduced on The Muppet Show as the pet of Scooter's uncle J.P. Gross, the owner of the Muppet Theater. Usually he was portrayed as a real dog, with this being one of the few times I've ever seen him use actual words. The other two dogs were recurring characters on The Muppet Show who usually appeared in production numbers. The gray dog, known as Wolfhound, was later used as Bubba the bartender in the Henson TV special Dog City, with the other one, known as Lyle, being used in the same special. Keeping in vein with the episode's theme, all dogs are murdered as the song ends and the number finishes with a hatchet being thrown at Animal's head. But he likes it. After that, Liza comes into her dressing room to find Kermit unconscious and rushes to his side, thinking that he had croaked, but Kermit claims that he tried to but was too weak. Feeling as if the case is going nowhere under his investigation, Kermit suggests that Liza ask someone else to cover it, thinking that it's taking too long for it to be solved. But Liza insists that he should not give up and sings A Quiet Thing. Kermit joins in, but the number turns the opposite when the body of a murdered Muppet falls out of the closet. Liza says, "Nobody listens to lyrics anymore." In the canteen, Patrol Bear Fozzie is still on the case. The first Muppet he questions is Lou Zealand, asking if he has an alibi. Lou answers, "I have a halibut." When Fozzie explains what an alibi means, Lou shows him his pet halibut as he suddenly yells, "Poison!" and drops dead. Fozzie, of course, surmises that Lou was murdered, but Bunsen claims that he choked on a fishbone and was yelling poisson, the French word for fish, just as Bunsen, Beaker, and the penguins in the canteen are the next victims. Fozzie theorizes that perhaps the food in the canteen is causing this to happen, so to prove that the food is safe, the Swedish chef tastes some of it, but it kills him. Unsure of what to do, Fozzie calls for Kermit as Gonzo returns to sing Great Day. Just as Fozzie finally catches up to Kermit, Kermit calls for all of the Muppets to inform them that Liza has discovered the identity of the murderer. But before she can reveal the name, the lights suddenly go out as gunshots are heard, and Liza is discovered to be the next victim when the lights are turned back on. After her dramatic death, Statler and Waldorf suddenly run on stage claiming to love Liza, and we're only after the other Muppets as Liza reveals that her death was in fact a scene. Statler and Waldorf praise Liza's acting, calling it the best performance we've seen on this show in years, as Patrol Bear Fozzie arrests Statler and Waldorf for murder, leading to the final number, Liza performing Everything's Coming Up Roses with the Muppets, and Statler and Waldorf are sentenced to 20 years imprisoned in their theater box. So now they have to watch the Muppet Show, they don't have a choice. Number 5, Jonathan Winters. Okay, so first of all, Jonathan Winters is one of my favorite comedians. When Scooter calls on Jonathan, he is convinced that a gypsy has put a curse on the show, claiming to have seen a gypsy with one eye in the alley. Scooter doesn't believe it until he's hit by a hat rack. Is that the same hat rack who writes the show? You Muppet fans know what I'm talking about. During Kermit's introduction to the opening number, he's nearly hit by 2 sandbags dropped by the stagehands. Happy to have not been hit, Kermit says, "I thought lightning never struck twice," just as he is suddenly hit by lightning. After the first act goes completely awry, the next few acts face many problems before they take the stage. Scooter calls on Patty Severn and her trained chair, but the chair breaks on the way to the stage. Kermit calls on the next act in Patty's place, Bernice and her half-horse, half-watermelon act, but just then, Floyd Pepper informs Kermit that the horse half came down with hoof and mouth disease. Fozzie suggests bringing Jonathan on stage, but even he is too nervous because of the curse. However, Jonathan does end up taking the stage just as the gypsy reveals herself to the audience. Before Jonathan has a chance to perform, he informs Kermit that his props have suddenly disappeared, insisting that it's because of the curse. Fozzie suggests declaring an intermission, which Kermit doesn't think is a good idea, having had the audience leave last time he did that. To help Jonathan, Fozzie brings his own props for the act, which only consists of a collection of hats. Now this is what I like about Jonathan's comedy. It's very character-based, and with this sketch, when he puts on a hat, he becomes a character with only just the hat. But just as the act continues, the gypsy suddenly casts a spell, causing the set to completely fall apart, abruptly ending Jonathan's bit. Fozzie insists to Kermit that the show really is under a curse, but Kermit brushes it off, claiming that everything's pretty much as always, and that the only way he would believe that the show is cursed is if something bizarre, hideous, and totally unnatural had happened, signaling Gonzo. As Kermit proclaims that he'll believe that the show is under a curse only if they're visited by something absolutely disastrous, an asteroid suddenly flies into the theater, pinning Kermit's flipper. Kermit sends Fozzie and Scooter on stage just as 2 aliens hatch out of the meteor as they join Fozzie and Scooter on stage, frightening them away and convincing Kermit that the show really is cursed as Kermit comes face to face with the gypsy. The gypsy takes the stage in the episode's UK spot, singing Golden Earrings with a group of Muppet pigs, as one of the aliens goes into Jonathan's dressing room claiming to also be Jonathan Winters. Jonathan handles this by saying, "I always have to check. I thought I was Jonathan Winters." He doesn't even seem confused by it and even starts bonding with the alien, thinking that it's Steve Martin in a costume. Meanwhile, Scooter claims to have met the gypsy and warns the Muppet Gang that she is down to the final stage of her curse, turning everyone Swedish. This seems to excite Gonzo as he suddenly starts talking in mock Swedish, with the rest of the Muppets not too long after as the Swedish chef appears playing the accordion. With all of the Muppets unable to speak properly, the gypsy introduces the closing number in Kermit's place, while the final stage of the curse gets to Statler and Waldorf. During the closing number, a group of Muppet trolls dancing to English Country Garden, Jonathan hears the news about everyone suddenly turning Swedish as he is the next to be affected. Suddenly, the Muppet newsman comes on stage to report that he has not been affected by the curse. The gypsy explains that the curse doesn't work on those who are boring and stupid, like the newsman. To prove her wrong, the newsman pretends to be Swedish by referencing Swedish culture. The spell is suddenly broken when Statler and Waldorf are able to speak again, as the gypsy informs them that they only paid for the half-hour curse, and Jonathan pays the gypsy to continue the curse, as Kermit closes out the show in mock Swedish, with Jonathan Winters and the rest of the Muppets carrying on. Number 6. Allan Arin. The opening number of this episode has a bit of a Halloween-type theme to it as well. Carrying on from the Alice Cooper episode, an old man Muppet sings The Devil Went Down to Georgia as a Muppet devil bets a Muppet boy named Johnny that if he can play the fiddle better than him, Johnny sells his soul to the devil. But the devil's performance was rather off-key and was more like a rock concert, whereas Johnny's was more like a classic country fiddle and the devil accepts defeat. After the number, Kermit compliments the Devil's fiddle performance, but the Devil is offended by it. Meanwhile, while Bunsen is on his way to Allan Arkin's dressing room with a glass of bicarbonate of soda, he comes across Beaker carrying a glass of Jekyll Hyde potion, informing Bunsen that they each have the wrong glasses, even though they're the exact same. But after Allan takes a sip, he suddenly turns into a monster and wreaks havoc on his dressing room. When Kermit introduces Allan's first number, Scooter warns Kermit that Allan has changed with no explanation. Kermit thinks that Scooter is referring to his costume for the number until Allan is heard moaning off screen like a monster. During the number, a group of rabbits named the Bun Bun Brothers perform Zippity Doo-Dah, which ends up being ruined by Allan as he attacks the rabbits and destroys the set. One of the rabbits asks Statler and Waldorf if he can hide with them, to which Statler looks at the stage and says, "Hey Allan, here's one you missed!" Backstage, Kermit has a group of pigs capture Allan as a result of the disastrous number, but after successfully doing so, Allan returns to his normal self ready to do the number, unaware of what had just happened. Kermit lies that he canceled the number, and Allan disappointedly returns to his dressing room. Kermit is glad that Allan is no longer a monster, but Bunsen informs Kermit that it comes and goes, just as he returns back in his monster form. This next number has nothing to do with the backstage plot, but it's one of my very favorite Muppet Show moments. Accompanied by Rolf on piano, Fozzie attempts to perform the song I Got Rhythm, but has trouble keeping up with Rolf's piano playing. Frustrated, Rolf changes the song to I Don't Got Rhythm. And Fozzie's not even singing it right, he's singing it, I Got Rhythm! And Rolf sings it, I Got Rhythm! This episode's UK spot is a continuation of The Devil Went Down to Georgia opening number. Using the Heavens set from the Liza Manelli episode, an angel sings You're No Good, and is revealed at the end to be singing to the devil. Meanwhile, the Bun Bun Brothers have been following Kermit around because of Allan Arkin begging him to protect them. Kermit insists that Allan Arkin really is a sweet guy, which I've actually heard is true as well. Not just from our previous guest Lou Berger from his story about meeting Allan Arkin, but Allan had a summer home not too far away from where I live, and I've heard that he treated everyone just like one of the locals. Anyway, Kermit realizes that he spoke too soon as he hears Allan moaning again and decides to protect the rabbits. The rabbits follow Kermit on stage as Bunsen decides to dispose of the Jekyll Hyde potion because of Allan Arkin, but after Kermit has introduced Muppet Labs, he sets it down on the counter instead. When Kermit returns backstage, he takes a sip of it himself, unaware of what it is, and he is the next to become a monster. Allan, on the other hand, appears to be back to normal as he asks Kermit to keep the noise down. Kermit responds by moaning, and Allan thinks that Kermit's angry with him over the closing number. Allan finds the number exciting and feels it'll really grab people, which Kermit responds to by biting Allan's arm. On stage, an old lady Muppet sings Let Me Go Lover with a snake wrapped around her, but the number is cut short when Kermit appears in his monster form and frightens the old lady away. Almost immediately, Kermit is returned to his normal self. He at first is reluctant to introduce Allan, but Scooter informs him that he has been his normal self for quite a while. Before Kermit introduces the number, he asks Scooter to keep Miss Piggy in her dressing room. Allan returns to the stage to perform an original song that he wrote himself specifically for the Muppet Show, Pig Shuffle, accompanied by Dr. Teeth and the Electric Mayhem. The lyrics are rather insulting, especially to Miss Piggy, who Kermit and Scooter try to hold back, but she heads on stage at the end of the number and, like always, karate chops Allan, but he scares her away by turning into a monster. Wow! Miss Piggy usually isn't scared of anything. I mean, if anybody messes with Piggy, you know that she'll never let you forget it. Muppets Take Manhattan, of course, taught me never to rob from her. After Kermit brings Allan back on stage to close out the show, Bunsen informs Allan and Kermit that the Bun Bun Brothers have drunk the Jekyll Hyde potion, but Allan handles them the same way that Piggy handled him, fighting off the rabbits by karate chopping them. And there we go! That's it for this installment of Nostalgia Talk Bonus, and that's also a wrap on my Halloween retrospectives. I hope that you have enjoyed them. These were a lot of fun to look back on. All 6 of these episodes of The Muppet Show are available to watch on Disney+. So to close out, happy Halloween, everybody!